All right, for our next topic today, we saw a recent piece in the Wall Street Journal talking about professionals, young professionals in the financial industry, particularly that, and just the epidemic of Adderall and ADHD drug use in terms of the work demands that they're under, working 20 hours a week, 18, 20, 22 hours a week, or excuse me, a day, 80, 90, 100 hours a week. And that this has become, or it's gone in many cases hand in hand with increased use of these ADHD drugs like Adderall, which allow you to focus and improve your ability to do these kind of things and to be able to go that hard, so to speak. And what it reminded me of when I first saw that was just like, I remember seeing this and having this be a thing as far as in educational circles as well, higher education, college students, even down to high school in some cases, graduate students, everything, where that would be part of the studying and or the booking kind of thing, And so wanted to get your thoughts on it. So what is your reaction, Tunde? As a man who came up kind of in a part of the financial industry. And so the kind of competitive nature it is and how, and trying to outwork people and trying to always be, to have these deliverables you got to hit and how the pressure might be on to get every edge you can. But, do you think this is something that we should be concerned about from a societal standpoint, or is it just kind of not that big of a deal, not too much different than people drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes?
I'm thinking about the audience right now because there's a group of people that I'd be happy and upset if I say yes or no, depending on
you can't do that, man. Gotta call it like you see it, man.
No, I was saying depending on how they behave, they'll be happy or sad with my response. I would say this. I think, like anything artificial, if you're abusing it, yeah, could it be an issue? Yes. Can it be an issue with society? I think right now, what I saw in the article we read is that around 14 million Americans are prescribed these type of drugs right now, or whenever these stats were taken in recent times. So we got 330 million Americans. So that's well under 10%, closer to maybe 3.5–4%. So I wouldn't say it's an epidemic or a big thing to panic about. But what I would say is there's something to be said that those 14 million people are most likely, like you said, concentrated in parts of our economy and our culture and our lives in terms of finance, Wall Street, law. Let's not forget your profession, the legal profession. I'm pretty sure they're taking advantage of these drugs. The medical profession, right? Like ER doctors, staying on their feet for hours. Maybe they need a little bit of help. Politicians that need to go all night, that kind of stuff in terms of, being in different places. And that's what I mean.
Probably
so it
less
seems
the
like
politicians than the aides of the politicians.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like, but these are people, think about it. If you're in healthcare, law, finance, politics, you're in an important part of our society that's, people at the top of those various sectors of our system are making decisions that affect all of us. So that's where I say I wouldn't call it a pandemic or epidemic, but if you've got that type of drug use and a concentration of people that are making decisions about the rest of us, I would be a bit concerned because what the article shows us is that this reminded me more like steroids in sports, that it's going to all be about performance to win the game at whatever cost. And I think if we're looking at our society, like finance, like healthcare, like law, maybe I don't want someone at the top of a firm just worrying about the immediate gratification of settling that transaction so they can make, $1 billion when it might be, these might be decisions that they're making that affect all of us and how our society functions. So, I don't know if that's a long-winded way of saying that I don't think it's an epidemic for all of us, but I'm concerned that this seems to concentrate in areas kind of in the halls of power in these various parts of our society that are important.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that with this, this is kind of brings in that classic balance of, hey, it's a free society. And, many people would say, hey, we shouldn't be, drugs should be, something that people can access to. If humans have wanted to alter their consciousness or alter their state since humans were humans. And so this is just kind of a part of that. The steroid analogy or kind of tie that you drew, that's where my mind went to immediately here. It sounds like the reason, and I thought the same thing when we talk about this a lot in higher education. But the reason people are using these things sounds a lot like the reason why people using performance enhancing drugs in sports. Now, those are directly competitive, but when you're in school, it's indirectly competitive. You're trying to get as high up in your class. If you're doing this, you're trying to get as high up in your class as possible. You want to be number one in your class or in the top 10% or whatever it is. Or if you're at the lower end of the spectrum, you're trying to get over some threshold. So there's an indirect level of competition with there or going on there. And then in these type of highly competitive, highly rewarding from a financial standpoint, professions, then like that's something you get $1 million job by doing this, and then going 20 hours a day or something like that. And so it definitely, now the difference is, in directly competitive situations like with sports, if you allow this to go, then it creates a situation where almost everyone has to do it. Because if you do it and everybody else is, then you're going to be at such a disadvantage that you won't be able to compete, so to speak. Now, in an indirectly competitive thing, like who is the real victim here? Is the guy who won't take Adderall and therefore can only work 16 hours a week and therefore gets his performance review and gets fired. Is that something that we're cool with as a society? If the bar is raised to where, whatever drug is needed in order to consistently hit that bar, then are we pushing out people who aren't willing to sacrifice their bodies in that way? And ultimately, that's the question that you come to in this respect. The other thing that stands out to me about this is the social effects. Like it seems like when they talk about a lot of these drugs and the focus level that it allows you to attain, it seems to come at the expense of other things. Like it seems to make people more antisocial in terms of doing things other than work. Like, I don't want to interact with people because there's no direct benefit to my objective here. And so as you talked about the concentration of where people are in this type of thing, like, are we good with, everybody's so worried about AI and depersonalization of all these decisions and stuff like that, whether it be in healthcare and all that. It's like, well, hold up. We probably are losing if we got people that are, juiced up on Adderall making a bunch of decisions too, because it's definitely going to have them looking at things not from a socialized standpoint, but more in a robotic way.
Yeah, no, I think the article that we're kind of referencing here
which will be in the show notes, by the way.
Yeah, there was a gentleman who mentioned that basically he found that not only that his behavior and how he looked at what he was doing for work had changed, that everything was about like the transaction, getting to the next thing, and it was very impersonal in how he looked at his own work. It also hurt his personal life because he started saying like, well, why would I go meet somebody new? That's going to take me away from focusing on this. And he slowly started, seemed like he lost friends and he kind of just had no social life. And, they talked about some other examples and that type of behavior for an individual can lead to things like depression and a downward spiral because, again, we've talked about not only in our show, but in our society, there's been conversation about things like the epidemic of loneliness. And I think you make a great point bringing up about the concern about, we have, this recent stuff going on with the shooting of the United Healthcare CEO and the idea that AI is making decisions to deny claims. And people don't like that because it feels very impersonal. And it's a great point you make that when people are hopped up on these kind of drugs, they're also very impersonal, making decisions that have no regard for anything other than what's in front of them right now on a spreadsheet. You know what I mean? And so I do think we need to broaden that part of the conversation out. And it's because it comes back to like, well, what kind of society do we really want here? And I know that sounds kind of utopian and like, I'm trying to be Mr. Esoteric guy, but if you look at what we're going through as a society right now, we're at the end of 2024, just to give some frame of reference, right? December of 2024. And we just had that healthcare shooting and there's big debates and national debates in our culture about kind of what's going on here. What's the role of healthcare? What's the role of all this stuff? And I think, when we see people at the top of these type of industries, that like you're saying, it's and that's why I think the steroids and the performing enhancing drug analogy is so good, because everything is so hyper competitive. And this again is where regulation is supposed to come in, just in sports. Like you said, they regulate what we can put in our body as athletes so that it keeps somewhat of a level playing field, number one. Number two, that way the people that really have talent genuinely can excel, and the people who
And
might have excelled just because
aren't forced to do these
yeah.
other things just to keep up with the people that are less talented than them.
Yeah. And then you're also, what are you doing? Because historically it is shown that a lot of human beings will make decisions out of this type of competitiveness or fear of loss or whatever that really hurt themselves and the greater society in the long run. Because even with sports, we talk about the steroids and stuff like that has negative effects long-term on your body. And just like these drugs have negative long-term effects on how these people interact with society. So yeah, if more people were on these drugs, we'd probably have more tension and it'd be a more difficult society. So yeah,
I'll
it's
tell you
interesting.
this. I think you got to the right question, and that is, kind of, and I know you said, kind of threw water on it a little bit, like it's kind of sappy, but what kind of society do we want to be? But I think we've already made that decision. And like, we have decided we want to be a push, go get it, capitalist growth at all costs society. We've already decided that, and so this is just a natural outgrowth of that. Like, this is completely logical and makes 100% sense if you put it in that context of growth at all costs. Your health, cool. That's a fair cost to give up for growth. The environment, we've decided, hey, that's a fair cost to give up, for growth. Our families, family life and family, like people who make decisions prioritizing family, we kind of look at a little side-eyed, like, I don't know, that guy, he could be doing a lot more, but he's trying to be there at his kids' sports games. I mean, what's that all about? Type of thing. So we've decided, and so this type of thing, I don't know that this can be addressed from a regulatory standpoint, because this is a cultural thing. And so unless the culture changes some, then I think this is kind of the inevitable outgrowth of that. And that's where it's different, so to speak, than the when you talk about competitive with sports, that is a sandbox, like that we're creating a sandbox when we're creating a National Football League or an NBA or anything like that. Like, we're creating a sandbox, and then we're playing the rules of the game there, the salary caps and drafts and all these things that if you want to just have a pure, competition, none of those things would be there. And so the ability to regulate performance enhancing drugs would just be is consistent with all that, so to speak. But in the larger society, growth is what we worship, so to speak. And so this is kind of like, this is the outgrowth of decisions as far as, or just the culture that we already buy into. And to me, that's the kind of the biggest thing that you see here. And so, yes, if you're concerned about this, then the way to address this is more about trying to create a culture where a more holistic view in terms of personal development and, just what we do. It's not all just, we got what percentage growth do we get this quarter? What percentage growth are we getting next quarter? Because that is what turns the gears of the society we live in more than anything else that I see. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that's that's exactly what's happening.
Well, you're right, and that's the tension. I think that's why, honestly, so many people. I would say this: there's a lot of people who are at the top of their various industries, and all that, and they're pretty miserable. And it goes back to this idea, money can't buy you happiness and all that. And, I know a lot of people don't believe it. Some people do. But the idea is, like, in the article that they interviewed a psychiatrist.
But just real quick, money can buy happiness if you have no money. But once you have money, you can't sustain the happiness. Like, money can't buy happiness is like one of those relative things. Like, I can't pay for somewhere to live, or I can't pay to eat. I'm unhappy because of that. Well, if I had money, it would solve those problems. It won't. Once those problems are solved, the money won't necessarily continue to be able to address all those needs. Yeah. And
so that's what I'm saying. Like, again, that's what I mean. We have this tension in our society, because think about it. Most people seem to like the idea of things like family values, right? Like you said, we have to make those. Well, but that's where I'm going. Like, you and I both are in industries that are very, can be very taxing on your time and emotion and energy if we're at, let's say, a big firm, right? And if we were at the Manhattan firm or whatever. And you're right. You and I have kids and we're married. And there's a tension there, right? Because our kids have sports and our wives want to see us, and all that stuff. And so I've been in corporate America where that culture was like that, 20 years ago, where it was like, if you kind of were the dad that wanted to go see your kids, softball game on a 5 o'clock in the evening, you people looked at you funny when you left at the office, like you weren't, going
At
all
six
out.
o'clock.
And yeah,
You're like,
and so and that's a pressure, right? And so we say we say we want to have family values and have the nuclear family stay together, but then we have an environment where if we don't somehow, like you said, create the culture, and I don't know how you do that, but it's just if we don't change and say, okay, not everything is about growth, right? Like not everything is about squeezing the last drop of blood out of every piece of stone here. And you know what? People should have a life because it makes them happier. And if they're happier, they'll probably be a different type of worker and blah, 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 blah. Right. And when I was thinking about that psychiatrist in the article who said over 50% of his patients are Wall Street types. And there was actually two of them. They interviewed two psychiatrists that both said the same thing. And obviously these guys were in New York where they're in an ecosphere where there's more of those people around. But it reminded me that there's been studies done that people at the top of these type of industries, corporate titans, law, Wall Street, there's usually a level of sociopathy. And I think that's one thing that these drugs like Adderall help people that aren't natural sociopaths become a little bit sociopathic so they can stay in that focus and they can stay in that kind of mindset where they don't have empathy and they're not worried about going home to watch their kids sport. They're not even worried about themselves. They don't stop to eat, stuff like that. They're just on. And again, that goes back to, okay, so, is that how we want everybody, if as a parent, me and you and anyone listening that has kids, is that how you want your kids to grow up, to be stressed out, work? I mean, this article says some of these people work 20 hours a day on like a 6-week project to close some $26 billion deal. And I get it, they probably celebrate and all that afterwards, but that's so unhealthy. And they talked about it. Oh, go ahead.
But no, I was going to say, because I do want to wrap this up. And this is where you get into the idea of the free society, because the question of whether or not that's something that I would encourage my kid, or you wouldn't, like for your kids, or whatever, like what a person would encourage. But also the other question is whether or not you think that society should be cutting that off altogether. Like, should that be an option for people? And that's where you get into, it's like, well, hold on. Your sensibilities aren't necessarily the sensibilities for everyone, so to speak. So while I might think that this is an unhealthy way to be, and then I might be willing to say, hey, I'm going to prioritize, time with my family a little bit more, than a person who does this. A lot of the professions, now I'm in a profession and that I'm as an attorney, that it does lend more towards, hey, push. But if I take the mindset, okay, I'm not going to necessarily do that. I'm going to try to find a way to earn, but also to have the family life, then that option should be available to me. But I don't know that I'm in position then to turn around and tell everybody else who, hey, you guys got to be like this as well. So that's where some of it is a choice, and so the question is, and as you pointed out, once it becomes the pressure to turn people who may not be self-selected as a Wall Street professional because they just want to go hard 20 hours a week, but they're there and then they feel the pressure to be in that because that's how you get ahead there. Is there a solution for that? I'd say probably not. It's probably the kind of thing where it's self-sorting. Like, if you don't want to have that lifestyle, then you have to decide not to be there, which is something that we saw in the article. People, they were like, yo, I got to remove myself from this situation because this situation is not something that's complementary to the way I want to live my life, so to speak. And so, and you gotta, I don't know that you foreclose that option is what I'm saying, but you can talk about how one thing that does come up often, whether it be at the schools or at these professions, is that a lot of people, not all people, but a lot of people say, I just didn't know all of the downsides that came with this, beforehand. And they may have chosen it even with knowing, but I think freedom is on one part being able to make choices like that. But on the other hand, at least having some level of information to make informed choices. So, but I definitely want to close this up from
that was the first time I got drunk. That was when I was young. That was my attitude. I didn't know it was going to be like that. I didn't.
Well, I think from the message on your shirt, and the shirt for the audio audience, bourbon makes it better. I think that I don't think that not knowing was too big of a problem for you.
Yeah, When I was a teenager, I couldn't even handle a bourbon, so it shows my maturity now. But
Oh, there you
yeah,
go.
back then it was
You can
back then
handle
it was
structural engineering,
it
and you
was
can handle
yeah
bourbon.
bourbon.
So
Yes, back then it was Southern Comfort and Mad Dog and St. Ives,
there you go.
all the really exotic
Oh
stuff.
yeah, exactly. All the young man stuff. Not
Hmm.
Adderall, but yeah, the Mad Dog.
Yeah,
But no,
exactly.
but I think we
Cisco,
close this.
remember that?
Oh yeah, I remember. I remember. Remember the headache.
Yeah.
There you go. So, but yeah, we'll close this topic up from there. We'll have one more topic later on. So please join us then as well.